Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central Ontario with
Drew Solon of Dad Central Ontario.
What's going on, Drew? How you doing?
Well, it's March break, and we just took the kids to the Science Center. And I was reminded of two things. One, it's a lot of fun traveling with kids. And two, sometimes it can be challenging traveling with kids. But, that was a great way, I think, for us to see the kids light up and get excited about learning, even on March break. So I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing fine. Let me just ask, when was the last time you were at this Ontario Science Center?
Oh, like 30 years ago. It was cool.
Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't been there in a long time either. And sometimes I wonder, is it still there?
Yeah, it's still there. And the lineup to get into the parking lot, it's not worth waiting in. Just go around in the neighborhood, park there, and then walk. You'll be much better off.
Nice. Well, it's very encouraging that dads and parents are making time for their children to share the sciences with them. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a good way to spend March break, doing something that's fun.
Excellent. So let's get it started. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. So we have another new friend today. So I'm going to give you the honors to introducing our new friend.
Well, thank you, Ed. Yeah, I'm really excited. We have Alyson Schafer. She is a parenting expert, written 3 books, international speaker. And so she's an internationally acclaimed family counselor, parenting expert, speaker, bestselling author, and media personality. She's armed with years of research and clinical experience, which I hope to tap into today and learning. So Alyson presents concepts from depth psychology on stages around the world. Parents who are seeking solutions, and Alyson's forte is delivering actionable tactics that arm parents with the skills and comments they need to face modern life challenges. Using humor and relatable storytelling, she provides a fresh and positive understanding of family dynamics. Her quote is, "The end goal is to raise resilient, caring, and capable kids and have fun along the way." And I couldn't agree more. So Alyson, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here. Really looking forward to this.
So great to be invited to be with you, gentlemen. Looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Drew, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
No problem at all, Ed. So, Alyson, a parenting expert. I don't know that we've actually officially had a parenting expert on the show before, but our routine is typically we like to get to know the backstory of our guests. And so we're still going to stick with that routine, but I'm letting people know, stick around because we're going to get to the parenting expert stuff and giving you your tips and advice. But can you start by just telling us a little bit more about your early life? So where did it all start, Alyson?
Oh, so I grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo, and my parents were Adlerian parent educators, and my grandmother was an Adlerian parent educator. My grandmother lived retired with my grandpa into Florida, but they were Canadian residents, so they lived with us 6 months of the year. And on top of that, my parents were very community minded, so they took in unwed mothers and draft dodgers, and so there was, even though we had a 2-bedroom house. And there was 6 of us in my nuclear family at any given time, between the basement, the attic space, like pallets on the floor. My house was jam packed with people. And it meant that I grew up in this environment where, when you say it takes a village, I was the baby of the family, and I had all these other eyeballs watching out for me, taking care of me. My parents worked and did a lot of volunteer work, and you had to do things democratically. You had to have who's going to make dinner tonight for all those people. So I'd get teamed up with one of the draft dodgers, and our night would be spaghetti, and the next night would be my brother, and he'd hook up with somebody else, and they'd be responsible for making some meatloaf or something, and everybody had to pitch in. It just made such sense to live in that way with that number of people. And I guess it's the same in large families. So it was a really great, warm, embracing kind of childhood. And then, of course, I fast forward, I grew up in Waterloo. I got a degree in kinesiology at the University of Waterloo, and started my career in nonprofit fundraising, doing totally different things as every lost 20-year-old does. And then, decided I wanted to become a mother. And so when I first had kids, I was like, how did my parents do it? And, I wasn't about to open my house to 15 people the way my parents had. But, I started thinking, like, what did they do when I had a tantrum? What did they do when I refused a diaper change? And I couldn't pull from memories at that age. So I started to read the books that my parents had been teaching parent study classes out of our living room. Like, they would teach classes and I would babysit the kids. So this was always in my life. My parents would go off to conferences. In fact, they took us to conferences. And as a child, we were the demonstration family with Dr. Rudolph Dreikers, who he wrote Children the Challenge, which by the Library of Congress is one of the most seminal works on child guidance ever. And he was a friend of my grandmother's. And so my grandmother, my dad opened training centers. So all of this was going on in the background, and yet none of it I thought was weird or different, or I didn't know what was going on. I'm just a kid. So here I was at 30, reading about the history of my family, reading about Adlerian psychology. And I'm telling you guys, it was like I discovered a cure for childhood cancer, and I just needed to tell everybody. So I just went on this relentless pursuit of my own personal education and teaching and training. And that's the arc of time.
I have a question. Sorry, to interrupt you.
Hop in it.
Adlerium, what does that mean?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So Adlerian psychology is named after Alfred Adler. And people don't know that name. They don't recognize that name. But at the 100th anniversary of his death, the New York Times wrote a very important history of his life, saying that while he has the least name recognition, he is arguably the most influential of all modern psychologists. So here's the other. So it was Alfred Adler, Sigmund Freud, and Carl Jung. Those were the three minds. And they were all living together in Vienna, turn of the century, and they were all intellectual sparring partners. In fact, Adler was the director of Freud's his society and editor of his publications and things. So in the beginning, they were very tight, and then they disagreed and they kind of broke off from one another, and that created a bunch of politics. And Adler kind of moved to America because he loved how free and democratic and fresh thinking compared to the old stodgy Europeans. And so he quietly worked away, influencing people like Abraham Maslow. I mean, if anyone heard of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you take all the big thinkers in the positive psychology, humanistic, positive parenting kind of realm, and you trace their roots, they all kind of go back to Adler.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So
kind of puts him in place in time.
Yeah, but foundational. I mean, and that's stood the test, especially when you say most influential. Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, where he differentiated a little bit in that he's the only one that wrote about children. He was very into child care. He had child guidance centers all over Vienna, so his big thing was, and again, in place and time. So he was Jewish. And went through World War I, World War II, saw the persecution of the Jews. And his big question was, how do we as a world, and think of how timely this is today, how do we as a world with different race, colors, religious beliefs, sexes, gender expression, how do we all live in respectful relationship with one another, no one being superior or inferior to another? So how do we cooperate rather than be each other's hierarchical, obedient, the history of tyranny? And so he was thinking about these things and writing about how to really turn that into practice, 100 years ago. And that question is just as valuable today as it was back then. And so I help parents raise children to be cooperative and to try to dismantle our old parenting techniques that are hierarchical and based on basically control and manipulation, punishment and rewards.
That there, so powerful and so good. And I really want to get into all of that stuff. But before we do, I want to go back to something you said about your early years when you were being brought up. You made a comment, it takes a village. And so there's a lot of people contributing and involved. And I think, well, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think today I see a lack of villages for parents, and I see a lot of, we went through the pandemic, isolation just there in families. And so could you, I don't know, maybe just talk to us about it takes a village. How could that look today? What are your thoughts on it? Just because I think there's a lot of power in that short little statement and just your story, but it would be cool to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, so we kind of know the cutesy phrase. What does it really mean? What does it really look like? We know that human beings are social creatures. We're meant to live in community, just the way that ants live in a colony or bees live in a hive. Human beings live in families and communities. And when we don't have that, we're not meant to be isolated. It's why solitary confinement is the most detrimental punishment you can give in a jail. It's why the biggest punishment if you're living in a community back in the days was you'd be banished from your community and sent on a walkabout or whatever. So we know psychologically we need to be together. But unfortunately, what's turned into the parenting trend and I'm talking over, many generations historically, is we've become more individualistic and more competitive with one another. It's all about who rises to the top. Oh, America, where anyone has the freedom to make it, kind of a thing. If you look at more collectivist cultures that still think about the group over the individual needs, those cultures are happier. So, when I was growing up, if a kid misbehaved in the classroom and the teacher kept the whole class in for recess because Johnny, was acting out, no parent complained about that. Now, if you kept the whole class in because one kid acted up, you'd get every parent in that classroom calling, "How dare you make my kid stay in? He didn't do anything wrong." If there's one kid in a class, this is more American, one kid in a class that has a peanut allergy, the other parents will say, "Well, why should my kid be controlled over what he has for breakfast just because your kid has a peanut allergy?" In Canada, we're much more group think. We're like, "Oh, you know what? There's someone in the class with an allergy. We're not going to have peanuts in our class, or we're not going to wear perfume." We're much more collective than places in the US. But still, we're still very individualistic and competitive. So if we tend to be more like raising the little Simba up and saying, "Hello, the baby is born, the baby takes precedent," and the parents are all like, the child is interrupting us, stop talking. What did you want to say? We don't put demands on the child. The child wants chicken fingers. We rush off and go make chicken fingers. We don't make them thwart their own personal desires in order to benefit the group. That we've gotten really lazy with that. So what we call it's an underdeveloped sense of social interest. When you feel like you're part of the group, you're more willing for the whole group to succeed, and you will subvert your personal needs. So, for example, if you're on a soccer team, if you want to win the pennant, you want your team to win. You're going to be more invested in saying, even though I'd like to be on the field, let's send in the best kicker, because if they win the game for us, we all win. We all get the pennant. We share in the success. But no, in an individualistic culture, they're more likely to push their way onto the field, and they don't care about the team. They just want their day of glory. So we're very individualistic. We don't think in terms of groups. And the byproduct of that is, we got a lot of people getting A's and trophies, and everybody is really lonely.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And to me, what you're sharing is that we got to shift things. And it starts with parenting at home. And, this idea of Generation Me, entitlement, individualistic, as you're saying, that sounds like it's not sustainable in the long run. It sounds like it's going to create more problems than not.
I believe it has created problems. And now we're seeing that with some of the mental health issues that are coming up. So you might get away with it for a while. But when you realize, oh, I've been competitive at the top of my game, got the best job, the best wife, the best house, and then you fall into a Great Depression at 48 and want a divorce because life's not happy. It's like, because you've been pursuing the wrong formula for what makes a whole human. And it took you that long until you got sucker punched to realize that your value system was mistaken.
It's funny, not funny, but there's a quote that I used to say, and I still ever now do say, short-term pain for long-term gain, which is maybe the antithesis of what you're talking, like in terms of where people are going. But anyways, Ed, I want you to hop in here at some point, but why don't we do this? Maybe you can talk to us briefly, because this is a show for dads to raise confident, successful kids. Can you tell us, what are your thoughts on the relationship? You're a parenting expert. You're seeing a lot. What are your thoughts on the relationships you see between dads and kids?
So I always have to be careful when I'm commenting, because there's a range, first of all. So I wouldn't want to paint all dads with the same paintbrush. And because you're asking me anecdotal, it means you're talking about what I see in the world as I experience it, which is my private practice, the places that I do speak internationally. But I would say I generally would say that I am informed in my reading and in the people that I see in what's called weird parenting. Do you know this term? WEIRD.
No.
Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
Okay. Thank you.
And you got to know that most of the research on parenting that we read comes from that demographic. And that does not by all means represent the full experience. So I just say, I recognize the limits to what I'm saying here. And I don't want to stereotype dads and paint them all in a box, because the minute you say something negative, they're like, but I'm not that, Dad. So this is where I'm making broad brush strokes here. But the original question is, what's going on? What trends am I seeing?
What are your thoughts on the relationships you see between dads and kids? And
yeah,
I'll preface the question by saying, a big part of Dad Central and how we've been around for 20 plus years has been built off of research on child development outcomes. And what a big part of our show is wanting to, one, help dads recognize how important they are when they're positively involved in the life of their child, to the child's development outcomes, like their ability to succeed in life. And we want to take some of that insights from research and share with them that, hey, here's how you can be more positively involved. Here's how you actually build bonds that are different than how moms build bonds, but it's still very important. In fact, actually, it's critical for your child as it develops. So there's some elements of that we bring to it. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, yeah. And thank you for the work you do, because I agree, and it's critical. So one thing I would say is that we've really seen a positive change in dads taking seriously the message that you're sharing with people, which is that they do have a unique role, an important role, that they matter. They're showing up in ways that they never did in the past. It was very much, if you look at the history of, again, in American weird parenting, it would have been dad went to work, mom stayed home with the kids, and mom would have said, wait till your father gets home. And then he would administer the spanking for something that you did at 10 o'clock in the morning that wasn't around for. And it was very good cop, bad cop. And kids should be seen, not heard. And you didn't really relate with them. And if you did, it was throwing a ball around. And so we've moved from that position. So we have to really give credit for where credit is due. But what happened is dad started to move more into the picture. If you look at the messages from media, and mostly what you see is like dad portrayed as the buffoon. You see the Homer Simpsons and, the Christmas Vacations, and like they always portray the dads as being real buffoons. And that's really terrible because there's a lot of good parenting going out there. When I was growing up, it was The Courtship of Eddie's Father. I don't know. That's like an old gem now, but anyways, it was a single dad with his
Bill Bixby.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And with one son, it was all men. Right. And he was sensitive and he talked to his son, but you don't see that really showing up in the media. We kind of like to laugh at dads. And so here they are really trying to give it a go and really trying to step in. But I find that, and again, I'm making generalities, the moms, and again, not all families are, heterogeneous like that. It's like there's dads and moms. And so just being, open and aware of that. But typically what I see is that the mothers tend to also take their job more seriously than they have in the past. And so they end up doing all the work, all the research, all the parent education, and they get ahead of the dad in terms of that. And then what they do is they try to manage the father and tell them, this is how you do it. And this is how you put the coat on. And this is, did you send them to the park with the crackers? And they become, what ends up being heard by dads is being critical, and they don't want to mess up. And so they end up being sort of managed by their partner, and they step into or stay in that role. And they don't really co-parent in the way that I think dads need to be encouraged to step up. And they want to, but I see the boulders in the way that prohibit them. And also they don't have a lot of good role models. Like when I talk to dads, they'll say, well, my dad wasn't really emotionally available, or I never, I never, that was never modeled to me. And we still come from a culture where dads don't talk about their emotions. They don't reveal their inadequacies. And if you're going to be in a vulnerable, intimate relationship, which is bonding with your child, those are some skills you're going to need. And those are often underdeveloped in men for no fault of their own, but just because it's going to take a few generations until we get better at this.
Alyson, I want to jump in here. What you just shared, how has that been impacted during and post-pandemic?
I've heard so many silver lining good stories about the family being trapped inside with each other. And so a primary breadwinner for the family, dad, is suddenly at home with his kids, and the kids are starting to see what dad does for work, and that he's actually an important, really busy guy and has a lot of stresses, and they get an appreciation for him. And the dads are also saying, God, I'm watching my kid over the shoulder during their classwork, and I'm watching them in the kitchen make a sandwich. And because I'm getting a cup of coffee, he's making a sandwich. Suddenly we're talking about some minutia of the day. And suddenly everyone's getting to know one another, and deeper and better conversations are happening. And there was a lot of really great bonding and family time that was forced upon us by that lockdown. Now, I'd say there was sort of two kinds of experiences, kind of a bimodal distribution. The people that had a foundation flourished. The people that didn't, then it was sort of like being in captivity, and we had a higher incidence of domestic violence and some poor parenting, potentially child abuse and things, because it's a pressure keg when you don't have the skills and you can't get away to release the pressure. But the stories that I heard I had so many silver lining stories in my practice.
Yeah, something you said there I think is really important. And maybe you could talk about, because this probably relates to maybe some of the Adlerian philosophy, the foundation. You said if you had the right foundation. Can you talk maybe about that? What is the right foundation then to be able to support children and to be have that good parenting, crisis or no crisis?
Yeah, well, I think having the beginnings of a relationship, a true interest in caring for one another, and I want the dads out here to know, like, children are sort of wired to love their parents. They're not as fragile as you think. Parents think if they put down a limit or a boundary, if they accidentally raise their voice and lost it on them one day, that somehow that they've severed this primary attachment and their kid's going to be damaged. Kids really want to love and see love reflected back to them. That in essence, it doesn't take that nature bestowed upon us this desire to want to connect. It's why we have oxytocin, and it's released when we hug. And so it's natural. You don't have to worry, it's great to get some skills. It's great to have communication skills. But if you can trust that you were good enough, just showing up and being attentive and being present and caring and interested, that your heart will open and you will just grow from there. But we tend to be less relational and we're more managerial. We want to raise our kids. So we get really into like the right way and the wrong way and use your manners, and no kid of mine's going to like slough off on homework, and we don't eat that kind of thing. And we end up putting all of our attention into correction, and we don't end up playing and having a hobby and taking interest and sharing a book together and asking about, tell me about why you're fascinated with Harry Potter, or what, we don't do like going on a date with them, like get curious about them, want to know them.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that aspect, that last part of get to know them. Right. And that's when we look at some of the information we train family service organizations on in terms of how dads connect and relate to their children. Part of that is just spending time, right? Being with the child, observing them. And there's we said there's 4 different sort of roles that dad can take in play with their child and how play builds bonds. So those are to me those are fantastic, and something that every dad, if you hear that, those are the types of things you can be doing to build that relationship with the child. So.
And even, I know a lot of parents, I don't have time to play. Well, I mean, we need to make time to play, but I would put in the same category that if we got our kids doing things with us, even if it's getting a job done. So let's say it's like you got to install some shelves, or you got to clean the garage, or, whatever it might be. And you're like, I don't have time to play. I got to fix the garage. If you invite the kids into that activity with you, and then you remember in your mind that this is not about getting the job done. This is about taking a moment to bond with your child, right? You got to switch your priorities. If you keep that in mind, and that it might take longer, it might be sloppier, but that you're mentoring and bonding and, keep that front of mind. And to the point when you're talking about going to the science center, I took my nieces to the science center when they were little, and I was so excited because I have a degree in science. I was going to open their world. They come from this small town in Northern Ontario, and they have nothing like this. And I'm going to be the best aunt ever and blow their mind. And when they got there, all they wanted to do was ride the escalator. And now when you live in a small town and you've never been on an escalator, man, that was like the most experiential, fantastic thing for them. And I realized I was pushing my agenda and getting mad at them. And I wanted it to be a beautiful memory. I had to let go of my agenda of what I thought I was going to accomplish that day. And I had to drop back into relationship and meet the child where they were at. And that, we saw a couple exhibits eventually. So we have to kind of remember what is the purpose of this encounter? What is the purpose of this interaction? And if you can say, this is a building experience, this is a relationship experience, maybe we can drop some of those outcome expectations and kind of lean into the love.
I want to jump in here from what you're sharing with us, and it's really good stuff. And it's come to my mind to ask you this conversation piece. Many parents, they parent the way they were parented. Is that even more challenging now, especially for dads? Because the world that dads grew up in is certainly different than the world their kids are growing up in. What are you seeing, and what you would like to share from your lens in regards to that conversation piece?
Yeah. So, when we're talking about moving from obedience to a cooperative model, in the obedience model, there was a hierarchy, and kids understood the hierarchy. It was apparent to them. But what the dads knew is that right now I might have to listen to what my father says because my father said so. But one day I'll be the king of the roost and I'll have my own children, and then they will listen to me. And so they don't like it when I put in all this time to get to the top of the pecking order, and that I just expect, like my father would just look at me with that evil stare and I would immediately jump into action. And you look at your kid with the same evil eye and they don't budge.
They don't care.
And you were like, what?
The look.
The look doesn't work anymore.
That's that. Hey, my dad is still down with me.
Right? And you're like, hold on, this is how the system works. And so what becomes the part of the inevitable process, and Adler, he anticipated this, that as we see this social order, we have to realize our kids are being raised in an environment, a social context of 2023, where what they see around them is social equality. They don't go to a school where, like in the old days, remember they had like the boys' entrance and the girls' entrance. You can still sometimes see those written in the stone caps over the entrances. They don't see these same hierarchies, which we're trying to bring down. If we're being successful as a society, we should be breaking down these hierarchies, right? And so, if you have a child that fully believes that I am a human being and I am deserving of being treated with respect and dignity, and we teach them that, right? We say hands are for hugging, not for hitting. We teach them about respectful treatment. You don't just take a toy from your brother. You need to ask permission. So we teach them to be respectful to their human person. And then in a moment of needing to discipline without alternative tools in our toolbox, which we haven't learned, haven't been modeled, we're total pioneers here foraging the new way. We go back to saying, pick up your clothes. A socially equal child is going to say, don't give me orders. Don't command me. Now, they don't say that. They just refuse you. And because we have such good relationships, they often aren't really fearful of us because we've been so damn loving, which is good. This is progress. But what it does is it leaves us with an absence of how to be a good disciplinarian, because we basically said all your old tools don't work anymore, but nobody has given you replacement tools. And that's super unfair and frustrating. And when your back is up against the wall and you got a kid that won't put their clothes on and you got to get to school or to work for a meeting, you're going to just go back to what you know, what was modeled to you. Or you may even have a mindset that believes, that children are wild until you tame them. Or you may believe that respect should only flow up and not two directions. So sometimes it's really about playing around with some of these ideas. So just to be clear for the listeners, when I talk about social equality, I do not mean that your children are equal to you. I am not sitting down with a 6-year-old and saying, you're a member of this family, you're my social equal. The mortgage is coming up for renewal. Do we go fixed rate or variable? I'd like your opinion on that. I'm not. That is inappropriate. You are the leader of the family. You have different rules. You have different responsibilities. You have different power. But it's really about saying a person born deserves to be treated respectfully, including when you are training them to be a positive social creature.
Drew, go ahead. I could go. There's 3 million questions I have, but we have so much time.
I promised you a part 2 before we even jumped into this conversation.
Right, great. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, well, I think that is very powerful, and it challenges the hierarchical experience that many of us grew up with. And I really like your part about if you don't have the tools, you're probably going to struggle, right? In those difficult times, not in the good moments, not when the relationship's strong, but in those difficult moments. And so, maybe could you talk to us about what is one new tool? Let's say a dad who has had a hierarchical experience and what's a new tool that they can begin to employ when the situations really call for it? What would that be, and how could they begin, improving that?
Yeah. So there's tons of tools in this, tons. So you got to remember in raising an obedient child, you basically had punishment and rewards. You only had 2. I'm saying I could give you 30 off the top of my head. You're going to have
how about 3?
way
I was
more
going
tools.
low. You just start with 1.
I promise I'll give you a few because
Okay.
it does bring the learning to life. But I want to say you got to pick the right tool for the right job, right? There's no sense taking a screwdriver to something that needs a soldering iron, right? So in Adlerian psychology, and this is again a big differentiator from some of the other parenting programs you're going to see, is we always start by what we call diagnosing the goal of the misbehavior, which is to think about what the child is trying to accomplish. So if you can't understand the dynamic, if you don't understand why the child's doing what the child is doing, you're going to be at a loss at knowing how to make a parental correction to what they're doing. So it always starts with understanding. And we can't get deep into it, but there's really only 4 buckets. So I always teach parents what those 4 buckets are so you can recognize them. And I tell them it's not just what the child's doing, it's what you're doing too. So I call it a dance, right? And think about that. What's our participation when that kid won't put his coat on in the morning and you're yelling at him again and again and again? You're yelling, they're refusing. Like, we have to see both parties dancing together. And with a little bit of training, you can learn, just like you recognize the Macarena is different from the waltz, is different from the rumba. You can learn quick to recognize those 4 dances and go, okay, I'm not doing this dance today. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go into my toolbox. And I've got a part of my toolbox. It's for what we call attention seeking. A part of my toolbox is for power struggles. A part of my toolbox that's revenge. And the last part is for avoidance. Most of the parents listening are going to just stay in the 2 front toolboxes, attention and power. I spent a lot of time. That's most of the parents in my practice. And so an example of a tool for an attention-seeking child, a child who's trying to keep you busy, a child who has learned that if I get on task and do what I'm supposed to be doing, you're going to ignore me and get on looking at your phone and returning work emails. Good children get ignored. So I'm going to learn to kerfuffle and stir things up. So I'm going to pull the cat's tail. I'm going to pull the leaves off the ficus tree. I'm going to get up and down from the dinner table so that you can't talk to my brother and you're going to have to deal with me. And that's attention-seeking behavior. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is ignore undue attention seeking. Don't nag, don't remind, don't give them the payoff for that behavior. That's step 1. Step 2 is this kid is sending me a message. He's saying he wants me to engage with him. How am I going to engage with him in a way that actually meets the needs of the situation? So I'm just going to so let's say he's bubbling his milk. I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to take his milk glass, remove it, right? Without words, without saying, we don't bubble milk at the table. That's rude. Milk is for drinking. I'm not going to say anything. Just remove the milk glass. And then I'm immediately going to say, what do you think is better? Crocodiles or wombats? And they're going to go, which holiday do you like better? Christmas or Easter? Do you think whatever? Who's your favorite Pokemon character? Like, just jump into a conversation with them. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to have a positive conversation. They don't know how to do it. They're young. They're developmentally immature. But they're saying, engage with me, stay busy with me. So I'm just going to do that in a positive way. Start conversation. So that's one tool. Ignore undue attention seeking. Show positive attention instead. Or we say distraction. They're kerfuffling in the car, and you say like, "Oh, hey, let's play the alphabet game. What letters can you see on the street signs?" Distraction. So there's 3. I gave you 3, just boom off the bat. But the big one that really replaces punishment is something that we call natural consequences. And a natural consequence in its very nature is about teaching children. So it's an education model, not a punishment pain model. It's trying to teach them that every decision you make has an outcome. It's educational, right? So it's tying freedoms and responsibilities together. It's socializing them for meeting life's challenges, right? So if you say, for example, if you'd like to ride your bicycle, then we need to make sure that your head is safe and you don't crack it on the sidewalk. So you need to wear a helmet if you'd like to have bike privileges. Now, if you choose not to wear your helmet, then that tells me you're not ready for that responsibility, and we'll lock up your bike and we'll try again another time. Right? Do you see how that's educational? Versus if you say, if I catch you without your helmet on, I'm taking away your iPad. No Paw Patrol for you. Right? That is you putting yourself in a position of power. You're dominating them. They're not related. It says, when you do things I don't like, I'm going to make you suffer. It has a completely different motivation. At its core, it's a very different way of trying to get a response from a human being. It's less respectful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it sounds to me, the important part of this is that communication you're having with the child, right? You're communicating in advance, and you're also saying, if you choose, giving them autonomy or communicating that they have autonomy, but there's a natural response if they make the choice that is not responsible or appropriate at that age and stage based on your establishing the limit or the boundary.
And that's where I'm saying parents have a lot of power in this. We're not giving away our power to children in this, but it means that we have to, think about what reasonable consequences would be. And then we have to actually do them. This is where parents get it wrong. They love to threaten a consequence, right? I swear, if you don't settle down in McDonald's, we're going to leave. And then they don't, because they don't want to end their lunch date with their girlfriend who met them there, right? They're like, settle down, we're going to leave. Settle down, we're going to, we threaten consequences all the time. And kids, all that teaches a child, because they're learning. All they're learning is that you don't mean what you say.
Yeah.
Right. That follow through piece is so important.
Yeah.
It's the leaving McDonald's that makes the lesson happen. And yes, are they going to get even more upset? Of course they are, because they didn't think you were going to actually do it. But if you're consistent and you learn to say what you mean what you say, and you follow through firm and friendly, not the I told you so, just, it looks like we have to go. Then they will start paying attention when you put out the next set of choices, right? You need to brush your teeth and get all the old sugar and plaque off your teeth if you'd like to have sugar tomorrow. If we don't brush our teeth, then that tells me that we're not having sugary things tomorrow. You decide, okay, looks like we're not having sugar. And then you can't cave when they want orange juice in the morning. I'm sorry. You already decided that you weren't having sugar today. I'm so sorry you're disappointed with your choice.
Yeah. Well, so let's maybe talk about this, because I think this is an area that dads often struggle with when it comes to the toddler age and stage. So toddler tantrums. So what advice can you offer to dads on how to handle these tense moments with their child?
Yeah, a couple things here. First of all, it is age appropriate for toddlers to tantrum. They haven't learned emotional regulation. And remember that we're trying to get towards self-regulation, but it starts with co-regulation, This is what I mean about being communal animals. The same with the oxytocin. We are infectious. My brain talks to your brain. And so the more, what's the Obama saying? When they go high, we go low. When your kid gets dysregulated, you need to be like a Buddha. You gotta bring the homeostasis down to being so calm because you are being infectious in your calmness to them. So I know that might rattle you, but you can't let them be infectious to you and get you dysregulated. You got to be calm so that they pick up on your good vibe. And so get calm. And then we always sort of like connect before correct. There's always going to be that connection. They can't really listen when they're dysregulated. So you might want to just rub their back. You might want to go get a stuffy and say, here you go. Looks like you're upset. Like just do something that shows that you are in a kind, loving space and that you're not freaked out by their tantrum. And then I would just, in a little moment, just sort of say something that's an active listening response and an empathetic response so that they have a sensation that you understand what this moment is for them. So it might be something like, oh, I know you're really disappointed we have to leave the park, or, oh, it must be tough to be the baby in the family and all your brothers keep taking your toys, or like just name whatever they're feeling in some way that they feel like, yeah, that thing, that's what's upsetting me right now. You don't want to wear snow pants. You think it's warm enough. And then your big old mean dad is telling you, you got to wear them anyways. Just say whatever you think they're feeling. It helps them feel better. And then I would just let them play it out. You don't need to stay there and keep soothing them. That tends to make it go longer. I would say, come get me when you're all okay. And so see if you can walk away and get busy and allow them to have their dysregulated moment because you've done your little check-in, and they tend to resume. Where I think the sweet spot is, and when I'm working with parents, I have them keep a journal and I say, what was the trigger that set them off? Because if you can stop the trigger, then you don't get the tantrum, right? And I look for some typical things that set kids off. And one of them is inconsistency, and it's the arbitrary and the inconsistency and arbitrary power. So that's why that I'm looking for those patterns. Kids, they don't like to be told what to do. And again, so here's some other, if you don't tell them what to do, how are you going to get out the door? Here's some other democratic examples. Ask instead of tell. So instead of saying, put your coat on, you can say, what do we wear to school? Oh, a coat, you know it. Instead of saying it's time to go, you say, what time is it? What do we normally do at 7:45? Anytime you ask something as a question, you're empowering the child to show you how smart they are, and they like that. So it's not a command. It's the command that they tend to be allergic to. The same with offering choice. Oh, it's time to go upstairs to bed. Do you want to hop like a bunny or slither like a snake? When you offer choice, that makes kids feel more empowered.
Yeah, it's a great example, that last one. There isn't a choice of going to bed. There's a choice of how you can get to bed. Right? And I think that's the skill that comes in these moments of being able to employ choice or employ some of these tools at the right time and in the right way. As you said, the right tool for the right job. But I love that example there too, in terms of sometimes people ask those questions. Well, I'm giving them choice. No, there are certain things that are no choices about. You have to brush your teeth, safety, health, some of those things, right? There's no choice in terms of you have to do these things. It's how they can maybe get to there. And I think that's a really important point.
And so it's such a good point. So I use the example of kids with diabetes that need insulin shots. Do you think there's a kid who likes to get several insulin shots a day? But you can make them feel more empowered, and you can reduce the fight and resistance. I learned this from pediatric nurses by giving them choice. Not the choice of whether you have your insulin or not, but you can say, do you want it in your thigh or in your arm? Do you want to do it on the couch or in the kitchen? You insert other choices that make them feel that they have some sense of control and agency in their life.
Yeah, very powerful, very important. I love that.
Alyson, I just want to jump in here in regards to dads with young kids, toddlers. One of the foundations of our Super Dad, Super Kids course is the importance of play.
Huge.
I'd like to, if you could speak to that, because it's really, really important, I think, for dads to realize, especially with toddlers and young kids, the importance of play.
So play is the medium in which children grow, learn, and bond. This is how they are wired to have social interactions as children. So this is really about meeting the child where the child's at. You are in their native way of being, growing, and learning. It's incredibly natural for them. It teaches them so many skills. It's language, it's cooperation, it's creativity, it's bonding. It's interactional. And what I realize is if you, again, had a parent who didn't play with you, you may not know how to play with a toddler. A lot of people are like, I can't wait till they grow up and I can, go take them, go-karting or something. And it's like, they don't know what to do with a little kid wandering around, with a tea set and so it's okay if you don't know the house. You can go online to Amazon or go to the children's librarian at your public library and just say, do you have books on games to play with this age people? And they will give you 100 ideas. And it's okay for you to have preferences. Like with my kids, I was okay playing Lego till the cows came home. I could do Lego all day long, but I had about 15 minutes of princess in me, like not my jam. And that is completely fair. But my kids would like rather elaborate things that would take a lot of time. Like they actually like to play things like a restaurant or library where they had to set the whole scene. And then you would kind of come in passively and then they would like serve you tea or show you books or like, you don't act like it's just you being there and fully present. That's enough. And another great thing for dads too, if you're not sure how to play and what you're supposed to say or do, there's this really great thing that we do in play therapy, and we train parents to do it with their kids. We call it tracking, which is this non-judgmental way of letting them lead in the play or whatever they're doing. Maybe they're finger painting or doodling in a coloring book or playing with their doll, whatever, fire truck. And all you do is just notice what they're doing. So you're sitting there with your cup of coffee. They're kind of playing independently. Maybe they're coming over and pretending to feed you or something. And you just note back what they're doing. Oh, you've picked the fire truck over the dump truck. Oh, I see you've picked the little doll dressed in purple today. Oh, you want to play kitchen. You're bringing me some tea. When you just state back with no judgment what they're doing, you're tracking their behavior. They get this incredible feeling that they're important, that you're watching me, that you're validating me. So it's not scripted. It's not play. It's just a small little skill that really is powerful from the kid's perspective.
Yeah, that's so great, Alyson. In fact, I'm going to put a little plug in here because we have a book at Dad Central called Daddy Come Play With Me. And it talks about what happens between dads and kids when play happens. And it gives dads practical ideas, as well as the 4 different sort of roles dad can take in play with their young child, like right from almost infant all the way up. And so if you want to go check out dadcentral.ca and get that resource, we got something very practical and easy for you to download as well, plus Amazon, all those other resources too. But okay, why don't we do this? I mean, we could probably keep this conversation going a long time, but probably need to kind of wrap this up in the next little bit. So I'm going to ask this question because you mentioned Adler at the beginning. I think you talked about connection, relationship is really the core, the democratic respect, some of those things. So let's say, like, what do you believe is the most important practice that dads really need to work on or can apply to build strong, healthy relationships with their children?
Well, I guess it's going to be the inverse of where I see things breaking down. Because again, I'm seeing people in counseling right now. A lot of the people I'm seeing in counseling are teenagers. And I think that there might be a blind spot for dads where they don't realize that you've really done a great job of having your child look up to you. But often that comes with a quiet, high expectations and a child feeling like I'm not going to be able to fulfill the dream my father has for me. And I don't think we realize we send these quiet little signals of what we value and what we think is important. And, if you're a hockey dad and you got a kid who likes computers and not sports, those kids can feel like they're falling short. And if you've got somebody, if both your parents are, double PhDs and you've got a learning disability and you can't bring home anything above a C and you really struggle with school, those kids can often feel like they're a disappointment to you and they can get discouraged and shut down and not learn at all. So I think sometimes we can put high standards, high expectations, and these quiet pressures that if you ask a dad, they go, no, I don't do that. And I'm like, well, not intentionally. But if you're a kid in that family and you see how dad's going about life and how easy it is for him and how much he aspires for you to be great and wonderful, could it send a message that says you're not good enough if you don't? So I think that's one. So that unconditional love, be excited about your values, but don't push them. You don't kind of get to pick the kid that you're going to raise. You got to raise the one you got, just sort of like the wildflowers. You get roses and thistles and daffodils and tulips, and they all need different care and attention. They all sprout up in different ways. And you kind of have to drop the agenda that I was expecting to have a rose garden. Where's my rose? And that mindset will be transmitted to kids. And then they'll get that feeling that no matter what, I'm loved just as I am. And they'll feel more like their parent is an ally on the journey rather than I'm kind of the black sheep disappointment for what you thought I was going to be. I see that. I see that a lot.
Good stuff.
I want to ask one quick follow-up because that may be a blind spot for many dads, right? You said, we have high expectations. We want to see our children grow and become successful. And we're working really hard at that. And, we may not I guess my question is, what would a dad maybe need to look out for in his child that might say, hey, maybe I'm somehow sending this message, even though I don't want to, or I'm not intending to?
Yeah. Listen, it can go a million different ways in terms of like just passing on some of the male toxic messaging of boys don't cry, or assuming that they're going to marry a woman, or not letting them put on nail polish when they're 3 years old because that's what girls do. And it can go all the way to the arts. Well, don't give up your day job. Actors never make money. Better not want to be a filmmaker who makes money in film. And a lot of these kids end up saying to me, my dad actually is miserable. Why would I want to emulate my father's life? Like he comes home every week hating being a chartered accountant. Like he doesn't want me to be an artist. I think I'm going to be way happier than my dad. These kids are so smart these days. So if your kid says I'm going to make it to the NHL or I'm going to make it to the Olympics, you say, damn right you are. Absolutely. And you believe in them and you have faith in them. And eventually the rubber's going to hit the road when they don't make the cutoff, or you say, I'm sorry, our family budget, we can't afford a web page and $4,000 in extra hockey time. So, you're going to have to look for a sponsor, but you always have their back. You always believe in their dream.
Alyson, I want to jump in there. You said so many wonderful things. You said something very powerful there that I hope our dads realize this. Kids are smart.
So smart.
They're smart. And dads and parents got to realize that.
And when you can, this is a real sign of democracy in the relationship. When you turn around and start realizing I am not the wise sage trying to tell you everything I know, but you are the next generation and you probably have all the answers to what's going on that's going to make the world a better place. And you say, explain to me the fascination with TikTok. Tell me about why you think that Andrew Tate is such an interesting figure right now to so many men. Ask them. They are like the anthropologists of that will tell you what is going on from the ground. And most of these kids are fantastic and I've never met a kid in my practice ever that I have not liked. I have only ever met kids that if they started off on the wrong foot, it's because there was pain and hurting that's being expressed. But as soon as I've understood where that pain and hurt comes from, they're all good gems inside. And boy, they're smart as a whip and ready to go.
Yeah, give them
and to contribute
and give them respect. And I think it's a great way of bonding, getting to know each other, and just building a stronger relationship.
It's I'll tell you, in the teen years, even though I was saying I'll load you up with another 30 parenting tools for the younger years, but when you hit adolescence, the number one parenting tool that you have is a strong relationship, because you cannot monitor and supervise your child. They are out there making independent decisions. And if they are going to be influenced by you, they choose who they're going to be influenced by. So is it going to be dad, or is it going to be Andrew Tate? Who is going to influence them? Is it going to be this pop star, or is it going to be this politician? And so they choose. And if you've got a strong relationship with them and they respect you, Sure, they might get into their little whatevers, but when you ask kids, why did you say no to the drugs? Why did you pass on going to that party in the ravine? They'll say, you know what? I didn't want to disappoint my parents.
Bang. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, Alyson, this has been a real honor to have you on our show. Really love your message and the information you're sharing with our listeners. So much wisdom, as Ed said, but also very practical. Take this away and begin applying it right now with your child and in your relationship. So thanks so much for being on the show. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, where can they learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
My main hub is my website, which is AlysonSchafer.com. And there you'll see all my social handles. I'm at Alyson Schafer everywhere, but it also has my upcoming events. So if you want to take a webinar with me, if you want to book me to speak, my blogs are up there. I do a Facebook Live every Thursday. If you have parenting questions, I have my own podcast. Again, I interview experts like yourselves, but I also do Q&A. So if you have a burning question that came up today, please go ahead and email me or through the website, through any of my social media handles. And I do a Q&A and get those up on the podcast every month as well.
Wonderful, Alyson. Thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule, being a mom, being a parenting expert, being a giver, a true giver and servant for parents all around the world. So as always, we like to say thank you for your time. Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.
Love it. Thanks for being part of this village.
Love it. Take care.
Yes.
All right. Good stuff. Love that.
Great stuff.
Yeah, really good. Strong. Really strong. Takeaway, Drew.
Well, I think at the end, the message of unconditional love and acceptance of your child through whatever age and stage, I think is really important. I'm reminded, I talk about John Maxwell being a very powerful influence for me, a mentor. And I actually take a lot of his principles and apply it to my parenting. One of the principles he has is, he says, I put a 10 on everyone's head. So when he meets them for the first time, or it's like I put a 10 on their head, meaning that they're a 10 out of 10. He sees them as highly capable, as the best that they could ever be. And to me, that's kind of the message for every dad. Put a 10 on your child's head and see them as that, as confident, as capable, as successful, as knowledgeable, as smart, and treat them out of that same view all day, every day. And I think that's one way to build that fantastic relationship. So that's really the message that I think I heard Alyson sharing.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. One of the things I love that I really wanted to emphasize it at the end is kids are smart. Don't underestimate them. Kids are smart. So they're watching everything you do. Everything. It reminds me of an old song by the Police called Every Breath You Take. And there's a line that's saying, every move I make, every step I take, I'll be watching you. Your kids are watching you. So as always, want to say, please touch base with us via email, podcast@dadcentral.ca. Suggestions, guest suggestions, just suggestions about parenting. What's working with you, dads, or those dads who love dads or families? What's working in regards to parenting? We'd love to hear. Also, check us out on the podcast, dadcentral.ca/podcast. And we mentioned it. We have a great website. Drew mentioned it. I mentioned during the conversation. There is piles of free resources at dadcentral.ca/. Nothing against Amazon, but we got everything all in one spot. Like, you can only see one page, one thing at a time on Amazon. We got piles on our website. So as always, we want to say, reach out, dadcentral.ca. And finally, as always, we like to say that the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes when care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So as always, like to say thank you for watching. Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll see you on the parenting journey. Take care.